I do remember in the brief times I was talking to Tommy recently, he did relate memories about Stacy, very fond ones, Stacy Sutherland, although there has been some discussion that Stacy may not have been all that happy with some of the arrangements involving the jug. Can you tell me about if that is true?
Yeah, that's true. He wasn't all that happy. And you remember that Stacy was a consummate musician of the first water, superb musician. Tommy never claimed to be any such thing. When they first got together, Tommy was so thrilled to be responsible for getting Rocky and Stacy together. That was the biggest thing he thought he'd ever done. He thought Rocky and Stacy belonged together. He had no intention of having any part of the band or having anything to do with the music whatsoever. But something happened because Tommy had been turning on in Port Aransas with Stacy and had been turning on with Rocky up here. And then when the band got together, he was still turning on with them. They said, well, we want you to be an elevator. And Tommy said, doing what? What the hell can I do? I said, well, we got to think of something. I mean, apart from the fact that you could write some lyrics, and that would be great, and please do that, we want you to come with us. We don't want you to sit back and write lyrics. We want you to actually tour with us and stuff. I remember hearing this over and over again, and Tommy going, I can play a little mandolin, but all I can play is jug. And rapidly, he came up with the idea of electrifying the jug, which was a lovely thing to do with You're Gonna Miss Me, and was very useful on certain other pieces because he could make the jug sound like a fire engine in Fire Engine. He could make it sound like a dove cooing on another piece of music. He could do an enormous amount of different things with the jug, but the jug was not appropriate every single time on every single piece of music as far as Stacy was concerned, and yet if they didn't use the jug, then they couldn't justify having Tommy there. So it became a thing of, how can we fit the jug in on this piece and in what way? And sometimes the experiment would not be successful. The particular thing that was decided to be done with the jug on a particular piece of music would bother Stacy. He was good about it. He was really nice about it.
Well, it seems like the jug became a part of the elevators that was part of their image, part of what people recognize the elevators from.
You could look at the jug as being a gimmick or being essential. And in Stacy's mind, a jug could never be essential. It could only be a gimmick that gets you on the radio because it's not a real instrument, not like the work that he did on guitar. There was limits to what you could do with the jug. You could make all kinds of different sounds, but are they good? Are the sounds worth having? And that's where Stacy would disagree. He would say, in this case, this sound or any sound you're going to put in with a jug is not worth having. But he was good about it, though. He would allow it to happen. He would say, I don't like it. And in effect, he was saying, although he wasn't articulate, Stacy was never articulate, that the jug trivialized what he was doing, if you can understand what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
If the jug is good, then the guitar is being trivialized because the guitar is much more important and much finer.
Did he grow more comfortable with the jug being part of the music?
No, he became less comfortable over time. There was a phenomenon that happened with the 13th floor elevators that happens with every single group of any kind, I think, is my belief. And that is, when they start to get a little famous, each member has friends on the side who go, you don't need those other guys. You're the only one that's really important. Why are you putting up with this or that or the other from so-and-so when you are essential? Some of their friends are very sincere and really believe that. And some of those guys just do that in an evil way to pull them away from something that's successful. A sycophant will do that. Stacy had hangers-on that were not thinking of his best interest and would say stuff like that, like, lose Rocky, lose Benny, lose those guys. You should go on your own. You don't need them. You're better than all of them put together. And each other person also had people like that who would say that same kind of thing. What I saw my role as was to be the opposite of that, to say every contribution is so important that we can't afford to lose any of them. We can't lose Stacy. We cannot lose John Ike. I didn't like John Ike, but I knew how brilliant he was. So I knew whatever it took to keep John Ike happy, I was willing to do because we could not bear to lose him, or Tommy, or Rocky, or anybody in that band, or Rocky, or anybody in that band.
That brings me back to a point about when things started changing for the worse for the different members of the group. Many accounts have been made of Rocky Erickson's being put into a Rusk State Hospital. Rather than to go through that again, about the group members and you, after Rocky was sent to Rusk, what was happening with the group and what were you guys going through?
Oh, we were going through hell. We didn't believe he belonged there, and we thought he was unjustly sent there. It was a horrible blow. It was dreadful. It was on the order of when we got busted. It was devastating to be busted for possession of marijuana. It was devastating to have Rocky hospitalized when he didn't deserve to be hospitalized. Tommy and several other people broke him out of Rusk, as I'm sure you know. Terry Owens had Rocky brought to the recreation room nearest the door that could be broken to get him out. The guys from the other side busted down the door and got him out. They even left money to pay for the door. I thought that was very nice when Tommy said, well, we left some money to pay because we felt bad about damaging the door. So we left some money to pay for the door, but we had to get him out of there. I thought that was awfully nice. Who else would do that? But they got him out as quickly as possible. Friends of friends brought him to my house in the Haight-Ashbury and said, we have to bring him to safety. Will you take care of him? And I did. I took care of him for weeks in my house in the Haight. I took care of him for weeks in my house in the Haight.
Well, let me ask you something. At that point in time, what was Rocky's state of mind?
Oh, God, that was awful. It was horrible. See, the Rocky that I had last known was enthusiastic and was happy. He was such a happy guy, a truly happy guy. He very, very rarely had any dark thoughts. He was just mostly sunshine, unlike Stacy, who was always tormented by dreadful things that might be happening. Rocky was just a confident, happy kid, and he came out broken.
Coming out of the Rusk State Hospital?
Yeah, as I understand, while he was on LSD, he was given shock treatment.
During his LSD trip?
Yeah. That was my understanding of it. Was that he was on LSD, and he was considered to be crazy because he was on LSD, and he was given shock treatment and treated as if he were having a crazy incident. And you don't give shock treatment to someone on LSD. You don't give shock treatment to anybody, as far as I'm concerned, but certainly not to someone who's on LSD on a trip.
What was happening with anyone trying to prevent this from happening to Rocky? Was there people trying to keep him from going to the state hospital, such as yourself?
Yes. When I was in California, and this was happening in Texas, of course there were people trying to prevent him, but his mother had custody of him. His mother could have 3 doctors sign him over to a hospital, and there's nothing anybody could do. When he came to California and was living at my apartment with my son, Tommy wasn't with us. Tommy broke him out, but Tommy stayed in Texas because they'd been busted and he couldn't leave Texas. Rocky was in my house for weeks and lived with me and slept in my hallway on a bed that I put there for him. He partly slept in the hallway, and then my son ended up sleeping in the hallway because he was smaller, and Rocky ended up in my son's bedroom. And what Rocky was like was, he would say to me, in all earnestness, he would say, Clementine, the Russians are talking to me through my teeth, and they're telling me that I need to kill Jackie Kennedy. I need to kill Jackie. And I'm trying to convince them that I don't want to kill Jackie Kennedy and that I ought not to kill Jackie Kennedy. But they're very, very strong, and they won't leave me alone about it. That's one typical thing he would say to me over and over again.
And nothing like that occurred before he went to Rusk State Hospital?
He was so sane, he could get tremendously high on LSD and never have a bad trip because he was so happy. He was so sane. He was enormously sane. And to say things like this, there were friends of friends who came with him to California who stuck around. Every morning we would take him to the cold, freezing beach and let waves pound on him. And for about 3 or 4 hours after the waves pounded on him, he would be lucid. I don't know who figured out to do that. It wasn't me. But somebody figured out that if you take him out and hold him and let the waves pound on him, and at first he goes, ouch, ouch, I don't want to be here. Ouch, I don't want to be here. And then he would calm down, and then suddenly Rocky would look out at you from his eyes, and he would be lucid, and he would be the normal Rocky. And we'd go, boy, that sure worked. And we'd drive home, and he'd be laughing and having a good time, and then the next morning he might wake up and not be Rocky anymore. So I was okay with this. I could deal with this because I could care for him as if he were my child, my other child. I had my son, and then I had this Rocky son who had problems. He had deficiencies and problems. I had to make sure he got fed well and he brushed his teeth and stuff like that, because when he wasn't in good shape, he was not taking care of himself at all. And as people have learned over the last few years, that became worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until Sumner took over. At any rate, there was a point where I had to get Rocky out of my house, and that was when he started saying things like, "You know, Clementine, the Russians are still after me to kill Jackie Kennedy." And then he'd pause, and then he'd look at me and go, "You look a lot like Jackie Kennedy." And when he'd say something like that, and my hair would stand up on the back of my neck, I go, "He's got to get out of my house. I've got a small boy, and I'm not physically as strong as he is, and if something broke further in him, he could end up hurting me. Because the Russians want him to kill Jackie Kennedy, and all of a sudden he thinks I look like Jackie Kennedy." He often said I looked like his mother. He would always say that. He said, "When I first saw you, Clementine, I fell madly in love with you because you looked just like my mother when she was young, and I was really disappointed to find out that you were not Tommy's friend and you were Tommy's wife. I wanted to have you as my wife." And now he was telling me I looked like Jackie Kennedy, which I didn't in the least look like Jackie Kennedy. Too frightening. In the least look like Jackie Kennedy. Too frightening.